I love someone who is deliberately harming me, and being with him is damaging me. Accepting the full reality of what's happening, it feels psychologically unbearable. Holding this reality, it is heavy. It can come with intense sadness, panic, overwhelm, anger, and grief. I'm not going to offer you meaningless platitudes here. I will let you know that I understand the gravity of confronting it, even a little. I want to answer a question that gets asked pretty poorly. Why, when she's such a smart woman, does she stay? Now that's the wrong question. The right question is, what has been done to make leaving feel impossible for that woman? So I'll work through two things first. What trauma bonding, like the chains that bind us, what that actually is. It's often misunderstood. But I'll explain why it makes a coercively controlling relationship operate, why it's key, and how it's the neurochemical influence of coercive control that creates it. Second, cognitive dissonance, and why your own mind has been working so hard to soften what's been happening. So why do smart women stay is the wrong question. So is, why does any woman stay? Because underneath those questions, there's judgment, and that staying is passive in some way, that staying is irrational, that a clear thinking woman would simply leave. I'm sure you've possibly even asked yourself that. But staying is neither passive nor irrational. Staying is the result of survival calculations, not just ones that we're aware of, but in terms of our bodies that are being made inside a situation where all the options look bad and where confusion exists by default. The right question really is, what has been done to make leaving feel so impossible for us in those circumstances? That's what we're really talking about here. Not why women stay, but recognise what the person doing harm has done to make leaving feel like the worst option available. Chains are not required when psychological and emotional coercion are more than sufficient to maintain control. Trauma bonding. Let's talk about trauma bonding. Now, you may have heard the term. It is one that's used a lot, and it's often used incorrectly. So trauma bonding doesn't mean two people with shared trauma who are drawn in some romantic way to each other. It's not a romantic description of damaged people loving each other through their wounds. That misuse and almost romantification, is that a new word I've just created? We'll use it. That misuse of that term is one of the reasons that I usually avoid using it. But it is a way to understand it when we're referring to one person's response. And that's the person, the woman that's being harmed. It describes what happens when someone is subject to alternating periods of harm and relief, cruelty and kindness by the person who's meant to be their safe person. Now, it's the psychological mechanisms that holds a hostage to her kidnapper. You might have heard of the term Stockholm Syndrome. And it also operates in cults. It operates in coercive relationships in the same way that it operates in captivity. Now, here's the thing that we really need to understand about trauma bonds. If a relationship was always bad, if your partner was cruel and cold 100% of the time, you would have left when you could have. Probably very early on. Probably. Most people would, unless there were extreme cultural, religious or economic barriers preventing her from being able to do that. Coercive relationships don't operate that way though, especially in the beginning. There's the honeymoon period. You will have heard descriptions of love bombing. Essentially, that's idealization, being put on a platform. My abuser used to call me his goddess. There's this complete lifting, this unrealistic, almost unattainable feeling that's as if you're anointed almost. And as the relationship continues, the good times start to alternate with the bad, maybe a bit slowly at first, maybe a bit softly as boundaries become tested. But then those bad times are often followed by sincere-sounding, heartfelt apologies, sometimes by an increase in tenderness and by promises to change. Over time, that starts to get a little bit less, and instead of the good times, it's almost a diluted version of that where we start to look at just no harm as being the good times. Now I can hear you say, but Dee, all relationships have good times and bad times, don't they? Yes, of course they do, to some extent. But there are two distinct differences between a healthy relationship and a harmful relationship. Both come down to what happens during the repair, after the rupture, after the harm. In a healthy relationship, The repair leaves you feeling acknowledged, heard, understood. The person that harms takes full accountability and makes changes. They get it. They empathise with how their behaviour hurt you. You felt that you were understood and you start to see changes, observable, measurable changes. But in a harmful, coercive relationship, the repair might sometimes feel a bit like it lands, but it doesn't quite hit the mark somehow. It feels brushed over, minimised, or somehow the topic gets changed quickly. Suddenly you've become the problem, or you're told that asking for the harmful behaviour to stop is actually you trying to control him. You're the one being abusive. You end up leaving those conversations exhausted and confused, not really sure if there was resolution. And if there was an apology, that observable effort to change is temporary, tokenistic at best, or it just doesn't happen at all. But here's the part that really, really matters in this, because your nervous system becomes wired toward attachment. Anything your partner does that reduces that threat of conflict, that threat of harm, and seems to restore connection, it creates a neurochemical response. And that response gets interpreted through our conditioning as being love. The safety that comes after conflict gets interpreted as being cherished. And the relief from threat of harm not being there, that feels like care. Now there's a scientific term for what's happening here. Variable ratio schedules of reward. All that means is sometimes you get the reward, sometimes you don't. Now you don't know when, so you stay alert. You pay attention so you don't miss the next moment of warmth, apology or tenderness or signs of that earlier love bombing returning. And paradoxically, that unpredictable, inconsistent reward, that produces stronger conditioning to our attachment systems than consistent reward ever would. Now that's the same mechanism that a slot machine works on. It's the same mechanism that holds someone to a substance addiction. Your body becomes conditioned to the pain, threat, harm, then relief. And the addictive part isn't that you crave the harm. What you do crave is the neurochemical surge that comes from the relief. The moment that he stops being cold, the moment he becomes kind again, the moment connection returns. It is such an overwhelming felt sense of relief. Long stretches of cold or harm punctuated by moments of warmth. Unpredictable in timing, it's reliable in pattern. Researchers have measured this. The withdrawal from a relationship that's characterised by these unpredictable highs and lows is real and it's measurable. Trauma bonding is the thing that is created through that intermittent reinforcement, that cruelty, cycling with kindness. That's every bit as powerful as a chemical addiction. It's the same thing that we get from doom scrolling through reels to a lesser degree. But what this means is that if you think about leaving and feel pulled back, you are not being irrational, you are not being weak, you are not pathetic, you are experiencing a genuine neurochemical attachment response that is developed through systematic harm and relief cycles. And like any addiction, the withdrawal does weaken in intensity over time, but not immediately after we leave. It can take months and months to actually lose the hypervigilance that our nervous system looks for, the harm, but then also to crave for the relief from the stress and tension of waiting for it. So beware of the drunk dialing or the temptation to respond when you feel reminded of something from the past in those moments afterwards. But once access to that cycle is gone, your nervous system over time, it has the chance to detox and to recalibrate if you have enough time and enough space to do that. Our bodies stop seeking the next hit. The second mechanism that keeps women stuck, and it's cognitive dissonance. But let me explain it just in case you haven't heard it or in case it's been explained in a way that perhaps wasn't accurate. All it means simply is that the human brain isn't built to comfortably hold two opposing truths at the same time. We're built to resolve the discomfort of when there's two truths come up. Usually what we do is we minimise whichever truth is more painful to accept. In a small everyday way, this is when we start to tell, well, this might be me, when I start to tell myself that I'll go for a walk after work, then end up on the couch with a book or Netflix or doom scrolling and telling myself instead, I'm tired, I deserve to rest. Those two thoughts don't fit, so one wins, and it's usually the one that's more comfortable that will win. But in a coercive relationship, your mind is being asked to hold something way more painful than that. This person loves me, and this person is harming me. Those two statements create unbearable distress and tension, especially when your whole life has been built around this one person. So your mind chooses one truth and it minimises the other. And in a relationship where you've invested years, where you care about this person, where you have a home and possibly children together, the resolution is almost always to minimise the harm. It sounds something like this. It isn't that bad. It only happens when he's stressed. Look, I probably did something to deserve it. I'm not easy to live with. He doesn't mean it. He loves me. He's just struggling with fill in the blank. Whether that be a mental health diagnosis, a mother wound, his childhood trauma, the damage from his previous partner. Our mind will find a way to resolve it, and it keeps us stuck. But any of these feels at the time more bearable than the truth that I love someone who is deliberately harming me, and being with him is damaging me. Resolving the dissonance this way, accepting the full reality of what's happening, it feels psychologically unbearable. Holding this reality, it is heavy. It can come with intense sadness, panic, overwhelm, anger, and grief. I'm not going to offer you meaningless platitudes here. I will let you know that I understand the gravity of confronting it, even a little, rather than letting cognitive dissonance blur the truth that your mind, at some level, it already knows.